This is Jake Ciely, and I'm the blown ACL that ruins your football season.
Good news, everyone! Let's get dangerous!
This is so cool!
I know!
It feels so right!
It's Jake Ciely.
I'm sorry, who is this?
Nice try, Moonman! Pretending not to know! Earth's greatest mastermind!
You just made the list!
I thought you said that was a myth.
Just because it's a myth doesn't mean it's not true.
If you all blindly follow my plan, we may have a chance!
Sure, we talk about it all the time.
Really?
No. Burn.
Game on, you ducks. It's the fantasy football playoffs, and we have a good one. I have a good one for you today. And who would have thought it is the day of our Lord, December 10th, 2025, and we're talking Phillip Rivers. Yes, we're going to talk Phillip Rivers today with Pat Fitzmaurice. Pat Fitzmaurice. He's going to hate me for that one. I don't know what the hell happened there. But we're going to talk to Pat, one of the best in the business. Trust me, you'll see why. And we're going to talk things like Rivers, as I mentioned, but being able to trust Chargers, Chiefs, players that just popped off last week like Tony Pollard, quarterback situations, and what goes into his rankings with wide receivers and more. But before we get to that, of course, let's talk a few players in general. Alvin Kamara, I don't have him in the ranks this week. If he happens to come back, obviously we downgrade Devin Neal, but probably more only a half tier for me because, one, I don't think they're going to get Kamara involved, period. But even if they do get him out there on the field, I don't think they put him over Devin Neal at this point as they continue to evaluate Neal for next year, whether or not it's going to be Kendre Miller or Neal or another solution. So I will still have Neal, but that would obviously ding him a bit. DeAndre Swift, I mentioned in the ranks. I know a lot of people are going to look at the matchup and be pretty concerned about it, but it's not a full-blown panic matchup. The interesting part about DeAndre Swift is only 5.5% of the time he's been stuffed. The only two players lower than him with 20 touches, Keaton Mitchell, surprisingly at 5%, and Chuba Hubbard at 0%. So don't worry about, and this is since week 8, by the way, the turn of the season. So DeAndre Swift, yeah, a little bit of a worry given the matchup, but it's actually more worrisome for Kyle Monangai if you're banking on a touchdown. More risky. He could still get it, but more risky than it normally would be. Tyrone Tracy, sounds like he might play this week. If he does, I'm not certain he's back into the lead. Before he left the game, it was 11-11 touch-wise with Devin Singletary. So a 50-50 split, and Singletary looks like he's going to get those goal line touches back again, and possibly even more with Jackson Dart running less, which we're going to talk about again with Fitzmaurice coming up. Wide receivers, CeeDee Lamb is in my ranks. He's a top 5 play if he plays. It isn't concussion, so we should get the news. I don't think we'll wait till Sunday to find out and be like, hey, we have to wait. I'm pretty sure he has to be cleared before that. So we should know. But a reminder, it's a Sunday night game for CeeDee Lamb. Marvin Harrison, not in the rankings. You would jump, as he has that one game when he was back. He would jump over top of Michael Wilson, but is it a very, very tough matchup? Michael Wilson is not a wide receiver 1 as great as he's been going against Houston with no Marvin Harrison. If Marvin Harrison's back, he'd be a wide receiver 2 with Wilson falling to a wide receiver 3. Both a lot of risk in that game, as great as Jacoby Brissett has been for fantasy. Roman Doomsday is not in the ranks, and even if he is, pretty much not starting any pass catchers from the Bears. Maybe Loveland if I'm needy at tight end. But we can't trust any of them going against Cleveland, even though the Titans showed up against Cleveland. I just can't trust any of them. With Caleb Williams, they're relying on the run. I had to go back to the DeAndre Swift thing. But also, the target share is just not there for anybody. So, Doomsday or not, I don't want to start any Bears. And then if you do need a tight end, if you need that Hail Mary, Colby Parkinson. If you didn't see this in the ranks, this think about this. Since week 9, it's not just like the last 2 games. That's a big-ish sample. Tight ends with more fantasy points per game than Parkinson. Trey McBride, George Kittle, Brock Bowers, Travis Kelce. That's it. I'm done. As you can tell, he's been top 5 in points per game since week 9. So there's your Hail Mary play. Mark Andrews, and on the other side of that ball, Mike Gesicki, assuming there is no T. Higgins, which I don't have Higgins in the ranks. There's some more flyers for you. Phillip Rivers is, and we're going to talk about him with Pat. And yeah, a lot more. A few weather concerns, nothing too major this week, but let's just get to the good stuff with Pat. So, fantasy pros, and Fantasy Pros. If you've seen anything, I've been doing it, or heard also anything over at Fantasy Pros this year, partying, doing a good show with Pat Fitzmaurice, which, by the way, actually, I was supposed to ask you before this. Is it pronounced Fitzmaurice? Because I never say your last... Okay, because I never say your last name, and because you just oh, Pat, you don't think about it, and I never checked with you to make sure that my assumption was correct. But anyway, Fitz_FF. Yeah, like I said, he's everything. You tell everybody, because you got like a billion things going on over at Fantasy Pros. So I want to make sure like you cover all the bases to make sure if people have never heard of you before, that they make sure they get all the good stuff that you got going on.
Well, thanks, Jake. Fitzmaurice. Yeah, it's 50-50. I'm used to hearing Fitzmaurice. Happens all the time.
Fitzmaurice. I would have never went that way.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that many hundreds of thousands of times over my life, and I never get offended if anyone gets the pronunciation wrong. But yeah, Fantasy Pros, check out the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast, the Fantasy Pros Dynasty Podcast. You can find all my articles over at fantasypros.com, and my Twitter handle is @Fitz_FF.
Yeah, he's got a lot over there. We even talked during the offseason with the Dynasty, with the rookies and everything. So one that I always enjoy, like Bogman, getting into discussions with. And he has been doing really well, as he always does, but he always does well in the accuracy competition, but especially like wide receivers. I've been watching wide receivers this year, mostly because it seems like when we disagree on the Fantasy Pros podcast, it usually seems more wide receivers than running backs. And like I double check myself, not to keep a running count, like who's been more right or wrong, but what the question is behind it. Like, I have my own process, you have yours, but for anybody that's watching you or listening to you, like not so much to be like, oh, how are you accurate? It's more so fits for everybody out there. Like when people are looking at their team, trying to decide, the fourth, fifth wide receivers, what goes into your decisions and how to rank them and how to decide, a lot of times the toughest decisions are wide receiver 3s, 4s, and 5s and not the 1s and 2s. Like what's behind your entire process and being able to like figure all that out every single week?
Yeah, it is a medley of factors, Jake. It's snaps and targets and maybe the way those things are trending for each player. Defensive matchups. Is there a good or a bad individual matchup that should affect the ranking? Does this team heavily favor a particular type of coverage shell? Single high safety, two high safeties, and does the receiver fare especially well against one coverage shell or the other? And of course, receiver talent, quarterback quality. Is it a run heavy or pass heavy offense? And how has that team's passing attack been trending? Just a bunch of different variables, but I'm trying to make these calculations in my head pretty quickly because I don't want to spend 8 hours ranking wide receivers every week. So, sometimes I'll make adjustments as the week goes on because I'm second guessing some of those calculations I did in my head when I first put together the rankings Monday afternoon and Monday night.
All right, well, you know what? I wasn't going to actually ask you this initially, but it's the playoff time, and there's a question that leans into this too, is like, trust who got you. So how do you tell people like maybe not to go too far with it? Because you could fall down the rabbit hole and then be like, well, single high safety, outdoors, 40 degrees, one of the West Coast teams. But like, you see what I'm saying? I'm being kind of glib with it, but people can fall down the rabbit hole and go way too far with it.
Oh, definitely. And there's some things that like the single high safety, the coverage shell things. There are a couple guys you want to maybe key in on. Guys like Alec Pierce, who we know is like great against single high and not as effective against too high. So, I mean, that's probably the coverage shells. That is a D-bro thing. Derek Brown gets deep into the weeds there. I'm not as deep into the weeds as he is. I may be looking a little more carefully at the surface stuff, the targets, the snap shares, all that stuff. So, but for a guy like Christian Watson this week, who's going against the Denver Broncos, the last 2 weeks, he's been going against the Lions and the Bears, and the Lions and Bears have given up the second and third most plays, pass plays of 20 plus yards this year. And Christian Watson made a lot of big plays against those two teams this week. Yep. Going against the Broncos, who've given up like the fifth fewest plays of 20 plus yards through the air. So we have to take the matchup into account with Christian Watson this week, who was in my top 20 last week and is outside the top 25 this week.
Ooh, we might have to talk about that one tomorrow on the Fantasy Pros podcast, because I'm going to be interested to see how far apart we are in that one. All right. So now probably the biggest, like, who would have thought I'd be like, hey, Fitz, you want to come on for week 15? Like one of the most important parts, the first week of the fantasy playoffs. And let's plan ahead and talk Phillip Rivers. Like, that's what we're going to be doing at this point of the season. Like, Phillip Rivers, for all intents and purposes, I'm assuming a lot here. I'm assuming you're making the same assumption, which a lot of people are making, an assumption that Phillip Rivers didn't come out of retirement to sit behind Riley Leonard or even potentially Rippon. Like, he's coming out. He delayed his Hall of Fame career potential to say, or I guess Hall of Fame induction, to come back and play and start. So let's go down that road, because I don't know if you saw my tweet yesterday, but it was the whole, like, you've heard it before. It's the assumption, Philip Rivers targets his tight ends, loves his tight ends, loves his tight ends. And I look back over the history, and he's basically league average. He's had some really peak seasons, but also that came with a lot of the talent he was with at the time with the Chargers. And he's had some seasons where he's been well below league average. Again, we know this, Fitz, like talent around you matters. But we do know one of the biggest talents on his team is Tyler Warren. And now we have Alec Pierce, who Philip Rivers never had a huge arm. Josh Downs, maybe resurgence. Michael Pittman got a lot of targets after we saw Daniel Jones leave the game last week. So I know, we can't say for certain, but what are you doing for your best guess? Because people are relying on Michael Pittman and Tyler Warren, maybe even Alec Pierce in a lot of leagues at this point to get into the playoffs. Are you starting, benching, looking for other opportunities, especially because Warren almost feels like he's the biggest one that people are making assumptions about?
I am being cautious with this, and Warren has kind of been on a downward trend. They're definitely, I'd rather play Harold Fannin this week.
I have one spot in front of Warren.
Do you? Yeah.
Yeah.
And with the Bengals on the menu for the Ravens, I have to think about Mark Andrews and maybe even probably not Isaiah Likely, but I think I'm starting Warren over Andrews. Rivers hasn't played since 2020, but he was pretty good that year. 68% completion percentage, 7.7 yards per attempt. But what have 4 years off done to him physically? And I know I've heard that he's put on 20 or 25 pounds. We can't assume that he's going to be exactly the same guy he was the last time we saw him. And you would think the Colts are probably going to be run heavy with Jonathan Taylor to try to keep Philip Rivers from having to do that much. But still, I do think Rivers is probably an upgrade over what Riley Leonard or Anthony Richardson or I'm sorry, who was the other guy we were?
Brett Rippin's the next
Brett
one.
Rippin. Oh, good Lord. Probably an upgrade over any of those guys. But I am still ranking the Colts a little lower than I would have if Daniel Jones were still the quarterback. I think I've got Pittman, wide receiver 32, Alec Pierce, wide receiver 38, which might even be a little generous. Josh Downs, outside the top 50 or 60. And I think I've got Warren at tight end 7 right now.
So, why do you love all the Colts? You legitimately have Pittman and Pierce one spot in front of me on both of them. So we're kind of on a similar page. I wanted to rank Pierce lower, but then I was looking at the 40s and I'm like, would I go Pierce or would I just risk Kayshon Boutte against the Bills? And I'm like, I might still lean Pierce. I think he's at least in that conversation of those kind of guys now, though. So I'm with you on that. All right. We always have 2 fun questions. I put the first one after the first 2, and this is the first one. My rankings this week. I don't know if you read my article this week. I know you've mentioned you've read them before, so you might have cheated to see my list. But I ranked because I'm going to see John Cena's final match on Saturday in D.C. So I said, let's do the best wrestling matches in WWE since the turn of the century, 2000, which just happens to be John Cena's debut in 2000, well, at least in WWF at the time. So I want to ask Fitz, because I know you're a wrestling fan too, what's your favorite match that immediately comes to mind since the turn of the century, since 2000?
Yeah, one definitely came right into my head, and it does go back to that early part of it and kind of the tail end of the Attitude Era in the WWE. TLC2 at WrestleMania in 2001, a 3-way tables, ladders, and chairs tag team match with the Hardy Boys, the Dudley Boys, and Edge and Christian. And just some of the spots in that match where that was the one where I think Edge speared Jeff Hardy off the top of a ladder, and Jeff Hardy did a swanton bomb off a 20-foot ladder. I don't know how Jeff Hardy is still alive, quite honestly. Some of the spots that guy.
How he's still walking? That's the biggest thing.
As far as as far as just pure stuntman ability, has there ever been anyone better than Jeff Hardy? I can't imagine.
No, but I think he also kind of gave the forewarning of the era after is let's not go too far, end up on drugs for the rest of your life, and then potentially, I'm not trying to make this really sour, but potentially the guy had to be on drugs constantly because of all the pain. That's insane.
Yeah. What he's put his body.
Did you look at my list, by the way? Did you see
I've not seen it this week. No,
That's number 2.
Okay.
That's number 2. So number 1 was Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, WrestleMania 25.
Yeah, great storytelling.
I went back and forth. So I think the TLC 2 was because this is why I asked if you saw my list. I was at TLC 1. I was at SummerSlam 2000 in North Carolina, and I saw the very first one ever live in person. By the way, Kane in person, holy crap, he looks even bigger in person. It's insane. But I saw the very first one, so like that one kind of always holds a special place in my heart. That even TLC 2 did it like the next level, like you're going from like A class to S class. But yeah, that's why I almost wanted to rank it 1, but it's like I saw the first one and it just takes that special level to it. But let's get back to fantasy for everybody. So we also have, interesting enough, this is why seasons change. This makes our jobs fun, Pat, is that it's week 15 and we are borderline terrified, I would say, of starting most Chargers and Chiefs. Like Rashee Rice, boom, in your lineup. Travis Kelce, it's tight end. You got to keep him out there. Now that we have Omarion Hampton back, Omarion Hampton and maybe Kamani Vidal, but now you can see where I'm going with this. It's the quarterbacks, plural. I'm assuming Patrick Mahomes is tough to bench, but how far down the list are you going Justin Herbert after watching that happen? Quentin Johnston feels like you can't play him. Keenan Allen feels like you can't play him. Xavier Worthy feels like you can't play him. And then to come back to the Chargers, now we can't even trust Oronde Gadsden at tight end. And are we even considering benching Ladd McConkey at this point? Like, Pat, what are we doing about these teams with week 15 playoffs on the line?
I know. Can you believe the difference that there was between like that week 1 game when everyone was excited to start these guys and now it's just, yeah, like I don't want to play Justin Herbert or really any of the Chargers pass catchers because the Chargers offensive line isn't giving Herbert any time to throw. Omarion Hampton played less than half as many snaps as Kamani Vidal Monday night in Hampton's first game back from injury. Now maybe that workload starts to shift toward Hampton and possibly violently so in week 15, but it's still maybe a messy split that devalues both guys. And Oronde Gadsden, wow, that was fun while it lasted, wasn't it, Jake? I mean, I'll be back in on him for 2026, but he's unplayable right now. And the Chiefs defense doesn't really present favorable matchups for any of these guys. And then on the other side of the coin, the Chargers have an excellent pass defense, and no one in the Chiefs passing game is all that appealing, except for maybe Rashee Rice, who just kind of gets by on volume. And obviously the Chiefs running backs aren't all that sexy. Like you can play Kareem Hunt and hope for a touchdown and about 60 yards, but that's about it. Like if we had a top 5 from this game, Jake, in terms of fantasy startability this week, what would we put it at? Like Rice has to be number 1, right?
Rice, I would actually go Kelce before Mahomes at this point. And then I'd probably go Hampton and Vidal for 4 and 5. Like, yeah. And I think that's the biggest one. Like, how far down did you push Ladd McConkey in your ranks this week? Because I have him as 26, and I don't even love that.
I think I'm at 21, and that that feels too high. You're right.
Like I have, and again, so one of the things, and we talk about it on the show that Pat and I do together, and a lot of it's like versus, and we get into the conversation about it. But like, don't be tricked by this. Like, I'm not like, oh my God, he has him 21. A lot of times we're talking about, okay, this is now the conversation with a Juwan Jennings or a DK Metcalf. Like, it's kind of contexty in that aspect. Don't get so much hung up on like 21 specifically. But the other part, Fitz, is I alluded to it earlier in the podcast, and I said we always tell people, us industry people are always like, trust who got you here, because you get down to week 15, it's like, oh my God, the playoffs, I have to win, and then you start over analyzing every single player on your roster, and you're like, well, this matchup, and you're like, oh my God, and your brain breaks. But I wanted to kind of take it to the other direction and say there might be 3 players who didn't actually get you here. Like, if you were relying on them to this point, you're not in the playoffs. You're in your consolation bracket. But now you might be thinking about it, because these are the 3. Tony Pollard just came off a huge game, had been a massive disappointment the entire year, as Tony Pollard was. Jerry Jeudy, same boat, just coming off a big game, but his is a little different because Cedric Tillman got a concussion. George Sanders is finally starting to look really good for this offense, starting to spark the offense, I should say. And then Jaden Reed, who's missed most of the season, first game back, looks like 90% Jaden Reed, but as you mentioned, also gets the Broncos. So would you trust any of those 3 in your fantasy playoffs? I think most of them, like Pollard would be your flex play, Jeudy would be your wide receiver 4, Reed probably your wide receiver 4, but that's the point. Would you put any of them in your lineup?
Reluctantly, I think the one I would maybe be most willing to play would actually be Jerry Jeudy this week. Like, he's
where I was leaning to.
Yeah, he's completely untrustworthy, Jake, but at least Shedeur Sanders has helped restore fantasy viability for Jerry Jeudy. And the Bears have been giving up a lot of big plays, and they have played most of the season without their two best corners, Jalen Johnson, Kyler Gordon. But Kyler Gordon came back last week, immediately got re-injured, not going to play this week. Jalen Johnson didn't look great. And I mean, if you could promise me that Jerry Jeudy was going to run a decent number of his routes against CJ Gardner-Johnson, like I'd bump him 10 spots in the rankings, because CJ Gardner-Johnson got completely victimized last week against the Packers. So yeah, like you could play Jeudy in a pinch, although I don't know how pass friendly the weather is going to be. Chicago is supposed to be like 10 degrees with brisk wind on Sunday. So maybe not a great passing environment. Reed, the snap shares are usually around 60% because he doesn't play in three receiver sets for the Packers. That's kind of a limiting factor, but I still think he's playable most weeks. I don't want to play him this week against the Broncos. I mean, maybe he plays a bigger role like vis-a-vis Christian Watson, just because I think Love's going to want to get rid of the ball quickly against Nick Bonito and company. But still, I don't think he's all that appealing. And I just want to pretend, Jake, the Tony Pollard thing didn't happen last week, because I drafted him in a lot of leagues because of the Tyjae Spears injury. I'm like, okay, you're going to give me this guy in like the 6th or 7th round. He gets this clear runway for like 4 weeks at least, where there's no Spears around. He's going to get all the touches. Didn't do anything with all the touches. And last week was really the first time all year he did anything with the heavy volume. So I'm not chasing it.
Actually, so my little breakdowns, I usually cover like if ends of injuries in my column, but I actually put Tony Pollard in there, and then I put the quotes, why so low? And I was like, hey, he's coming off his first double-digit scoring since week 5. And by the way, to add to your point on this, Fitz, is I threw this in there. I was actually interested to see this, and I was actually surprised. He has 4 goal line carries the entire season and converted just 2 of them. I mean, I guess that 50% is not the worst rate, but like only 4 the entire season. And neither of them came last week with the touchdowns. Neither of those touchdowns were goal line carries, interesting enough. All right, my second fun question. This is the one that I always tell people, you can't try to maneuver through it and change my answer. Like, you have to pick one. These are poison pill. You have to pick one, Fitz. These are your 3 choices. This is all you get. First one. You can only draft team's number 3 wide receiver or worse every year for the rest of your life. That's all you can do. You can't ever draft their 1 or 2. Okay. Number 2, everywhere you go, you have a word bubble over your head, always showing the thoughts you don't say. Number 3, every time somebody says to you in public, hey, how's it going? You have to trauma dump every detail of everything going wrong in your life, even something as minor as you dropped a fork and it ruined your day.
Oh, man. All right. I would probably take the 3 receiver challenge here.
I thought I'd get you away from that.
The word balloon one, that is scratched off the list right away, because I would not. That would.
You're such a nice guy, though, Pat.
Oh, that would definitely lower people's opinion of me for sure, Jake. And so I'm intrigued by the one though where like giving people the full data dump,
trauma dump.
Yes, exactly. So that one is intriguing to me. Close call between that and the number 3 receiver, but you know, hey, I've been robust running back and premium tight end before. I'll do it again.
You can make it work. You can make it work with all the Chimeri DKs of the world. He wasn't he wasn't top 2 to start the season. So there's your little argument there, is that you could get like, hey, Ibuka wasn't top 3 to start the season. There you go. Look, I'm putting together a roster for you.
There are some gems out there, Jake.
All right. Last one before we get you out of here. Quarterbacks, not usually things people want to think about in the playoffs. They want to think, hey, I got to the playoffs. I don't have to worry. But there are 3. I got to throw Mahomes out. Originally, I was going to ask you about Mahomes, but he kind of got looped into the other conversation. There's 3, and there's 3 for differing reasons that you might be thinking about in your playoffs. Jacoby Brissett's throwing the ball 800 times a game. However, he gets the Texans, and we know what the Texans do, and we know what the Texans have done for week in and week out. They don't let quarterbacks throw for multiple touchdowns, actually more games with 0 than multiple. They don't let them throw for 200 yards. We just saw what they did to Mahomes. So you got Brissett versus the Texans. You got Jordan Love, who's kind of had this resurgence over the past couple of weeks, similar to that stretch he had 2 years ago, where it's like, oh my God, Jordan Love, top 10, and actually look at his game log. It's been top 10. And then Jackson Dart, who I'm really interested to see your conversation on him because I ranked him super low, apparently according to consensus, because I have Jackson Dart outside the QB1 status, outside my top 15 because he doesn't run. And I know it's just a one-game sample, but I brought this up, Pat, and I'm going to like speak to it and maybe help your conversation here. But the numbers I threw out pre-injury, 46% of his value from rushing, and of that 57% of it was rushing touchdowns. 11.1% designed rush rate. You know what happened in his first game back? I know you know. 0 designed runs, and only 14% of his value came from those whopping 20 rushing yards. So I kind of threw why I hate Jackson Dart supposedly in there. But Brissett, Love, Dart, as people are in the playoffs, what are you thinking quarterback-wise?
I still like Dart this week. And even though
I talk you off of it.
Even though the design runs have kind of dried up, like he's still getting like half a dozen rushing attempts a game where he just takes off and scrambles. And that's what he was at Ole Miss too. Like one read, not there. I'm gonna boogie. And he has had a rushing touchdown, at least one rushing touchdown in five of his last 6 games. Last week or 2 weeks ago against the Patriots. That was the first time in his last 6 games he hasn't had at least one rushing touchdown. And we have to love the passing game matchup against the Commanders, I think, this week. So, yeah, I mean, I wish for his own personal safety, I'm glad he's not running quite as aggressively, but he's still going to take off fairly aggressively, I think. Like you can only tame the wild horse to such a degree. So I've got him well ahead of Brissett and Love, who I kind of don't want to play. I've got Love ranked QB 17 and Brissett QB 18. So these guys are like tiers apart for me.
The tough matchups. All right, if you had to pick one, let's turn the other direction because Love and Brissett, you might have been able to pick up. A lot of people were already holding on to Dart. Brissett versus Love. Do you go for the volume and hopefully that breaks the Texans, or do you go for Love and hopefully the talent breaks the Broncos?
I think I'm betting on the talent with Love. I've only got him one spot apart, but Love, and especially Love's got pretty much, well, no Tucker Kraft, but he's got a pretty good hand at wide receiver these days. And, you know, Michael Wilson is great, but if the Texans are able to put the clamps on Michael Wilson, I mean, that leaves Trey McBride and what else? Like Andre Bach. I can't even pronounce the guy's last name.
I call him Baklava. Like, I'm not going to try and pronounce his last name. Actually, Trent Sherfield is now, like, if people didn't know where Trent Sherfield was hanging. Yeah, he's hanging around there. There's your other number 3, Pat.
That's right. Really wanted.
Great. There you go. But hopefully, as you can tell, if you haven't listened to Fitz before, number 1 on your list should be to rectify that at Fitz_FF over at Fantasy Pros. And like I said, if you haven't seen the show on Thursdays, well, debate, I think they put it out on Fridays. But anyway, we talk with Worm and debate player ranks every single week. So make sure you give Fitz a follow. As you can tell, very knowledgeable.
Thanks, Jake. And I look forward to arguing with you about Jackson Dart more in the coming days. Yes.
Once again, please make sure you're following Pat, one of the best in the business, very knowledgeable, as you can tell from his insight. And we'll be back on Friday. I don't know why I keep saying we. I will be back. Well, I'm including you. That's what I'm doing. Yeah, sure, whatever. On Friday, for all the news, injuries, and last-minute notes you need for Week 15 to make sure not only you stay in your playoffs, but you get closer to that title. Oh, by the way, speaking of titles, best WWE matches. Go give that a list. That a list? I can't talk anymore. I'm just going to end this podcast like I normally do. Go read that list as you heard us reference it with Pat. Whatever. Have fun. Love you guys.